All right, welcome everybody. As I get everyone admitted, we will get started. All right, perfect. Hello everybody. I'm Isaac. I am here because we're hosting Greg for a lightning lesson. These lightning lessons are done as I prepare with Eleanor to teach a course on AI assisted coding. This talk fits into that because Greg does AI assisted coding all the time. He's one of the people who I think does it best. So had to have him here. He's a co-founder of SpecStory. Previously, he was the chief product officer at Pluralsight. He led ML teams at GitHub. He knows what he's talking about. As I mentioned, he's one of the best users of AI coding he's seen. All his stuff, you've seen the video that we're going to talk about today. You may have seen other demos that he's done, and they all look like the really cool, flashy demos that everybody makes and throws around that aren't real. But there's a difference here because his demos aren't really demos. There's things he's actually using. He's built link shorteners, for example. And it's not just, I built a link shortener, it's cool, it's AI, it's something that his company uses. He built applicant tracking systems that his company uses. And sometimes you see demos and it's look at what was built in 10 minutes with AI and it looks cool and it looks flashy, but ultimately there's some disappointment because they aren't practical. His are different because they are actually used and they're used in commercial settings. They're reliable and he gets this result consistently. There's definitely a lot you can learn from here. One of the things I'm actually really excited about for this talk specifically, in addition to it just being Greg, who's fantastic, is that he's going to cover briefly some slides, but it's going to be even more practical than that because he's then going to transition to actually showing the process and doing like interactive live coding of these things and changing the videos. And rather than just kind of info bombing you with information and then being like, what do I do now? You can actually see the process live, which is very hard to communicate if you're just looking at static slides because the process is iterative. So you'll get to see that as part of this live talk. So I'm super excited. We'll jump into it. I don't want to take more of the time, but yeah, thank you, Greg.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Isaac. And I'm going to share my screen in just a second. But for those that are tuning in, I know everyone's like cameras off, their mics off, and that's okay for right now. But once we get through some of the meat of the beginning, when I do transition to doing this interactively, I want it to be interactive. So I want you to either, whatever you're comfortable with, if that is typing in Zoom or coming off mic and telling me like what to do, that's part of the shtick here. So before we begin, just so everyone knows, I dropped this in the Zoom chat and the slides I'm going to go through are actually all in this repo, which I'm going to modify with everyone. And so there's a super detailed walkthrough here and a link. These are the slides that I'm going to go through. All the source code we're going to modify is in this repo. So if you leave with anything, it's that you feel like you have the motivation and ability to do this yourself after we get through this material. All right.
Now, one thing to mention, so you could talk in the chat. That's perfectly fine. You can come off and speak verbally. If you feel like you want to speak verbally, but you're not sure how to interject, feel free. First, don't worry about it. Just go ahead. Greg doesn't mind. Second, at the bottom, there is a react button in Zoom, and you can click that and you click raise hand. I'll see that, and then I call on you if that's more comfortable for you.
Yep. All right, let's get into it. So we're going to build a product video agentically. I started with a provocation when I was advertising this, but it's actually a real one. There's this large money question out there. If you're a startup founder or you're working at a company and you want to build like a high res, high fidelity video, VFX is hard. And a lot of people don't have those skills and they have to learn them themselves or have someone help with that. And so I've been like really obsessed with video gen myself. And recently for SpecStory, which is the company I co-founded, which Isaac mentioned, we wanted to create this product video to celebrate reaching this milestone of 100,000 installs. And I said to myself, like, I want to just make this and I want to see how far I can go programmatically, kind of like vibe coding a product video. And after I got this result, I was just like so excited about this process that I wanted to share it with everyone else because I think it is like truly a big unlock. So that's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to give you the frame of reference for how to do it. We're going to jump into doing it together in the next 45 minutes here. So As Isaac mentioned, I'm Greg. Here's some places I worked. You can find me on X. You know who I am now. But why does this matter? Covered this. A lot of people can't afford to create like custom videos, but what if you can create a video just like you code your apps? Today you can. Traditionally, you might have used stuff like Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro X or maybe CapCut, and you're trying to learn this interface where you're manipulating keyframes and layering a bunch of assets and cutting things and doing everything manually. I've gone through this process myself because I've created a lot of like video gen things just for fun. And I had to teach myself CapCut, and it's not that hard, but you don't have very much control. And then I stumbled upon Remotion.dev, which, if you never heard of it, is an NPM package. And it's also a product that allows you to write React components and then render every frame of them. And it still boggles my mind how cool this is. The benefit of that is you're writing code. And so it's all in a repository that you can version control. And there's functionality that allows you to see kind of like the scenes in a composition live, so that instead of re-rendering a video, you can just hot reload something that's running a server on your local machine and see it change. And we're going to see that in a second here. And the sort of key concept to get across is that like videos are just like components, like React components plus time. So what is it? It is React for video. That is what Remotion allows for. And every single frame is just a React component that gets rendered. And there are these functions like the ability to interpolate frames at certain frame counts to achieve effects. So for example, like you can modify the opacity of a transition and go from something being invisible to fully visible, to do a scene transition purely through code, and you just wrap the content of whatever it is you are trying to make a video of in code. But here's the best part. Like, if you don't know React, the best part of this, and I know React somewhat, I'm no means an expert, is you can just use coding agents like Claude Code or Cursor or whatever you have access to do it for you. And so the formula here that I'm going to be taking us through is use Remotion as like the base and Claude Code, which we're going to use together, to do conversational development of video production. And so if you go and read through all of the material that I have that I linked, and I don't know if anyone has recently joined, but Isaac, if you could maybe reshare those links. When I made this video, this 39-second video, I did it in 2 hours. And as I went back and I looked through the history of the conversation I had, it was funny because I would say things like, make it bigger when I wanted to make a logo change bigger without being super precise about modify this pixel and increase it by 5, right? And make this sort of transition a little slower and count up from 90%, which is in the end frame of the sequence when some of our like install counts are counting up. And it totally works. And so that's why it's like magic, is because you can just express it the way that is natural to you. And the coding agent in the harness of using like Remotion gets it, because Claude Code and all the other agents that have Sonnet or Opus under the hood are really good at writing TypeScript, JavaScript, and React code. So what can you build beyond what, you know, is the sort of like target for this? I built some other things. So as Isaac mentioned, I built this API first link shortener because I was tired of paying for Bitly. And this is like the product video that I made first. The secret here is actually all the source code for this particular video is actually in this repo, in this example folder. So I actually used this prior video to bootstrap the process of building the SpecStory video. And that's another reason why this is super powerful, because if you think about traditional video editing, you can't just update some agent's context with a past video in a traditional editor. But this is all code, you can do that. And if you actually looked through carefully my chat history, which I have saved here, you'll see that whenever I first started building the SpecStory video, I just @referenced my prior example to kick off the process of building the next one. All right, the other thing, which is really cool, is once I did this first tiny dev product video, I actually shared that code like a week ago with a friend of mine who has this legal tech startup called Atria AI. And they made a SaaS intro that's actually on their website, which you can see here, atria.ai.com. And this is a Remotion video too, that the person that founded this company used probably Claude Code or Cursor to make. So it's super powerful, and you can use it for lots of use cases. If you go to Remotion.dev's website, you'll see people doing music generation and all sorts of custom stuff with it.
I think that's really cool because it shows that other people can do what you're doing. It's not some weird workflow that works in Greg's mind. So I think that's a big thing to keep in mind, is that this isn't something because Greg has an amazing video production background, which he doesn't.
No.
Like, this is something that anybody can do, which is great.
Yeah. All right. So I swear this is like last 2-minute slides. Some of the things that I think help in any use case of agentic coding or AI assisted development are understanding the sort of like domain vocabulary of the framework or language you're working in. And so whenever I pop open my IDE in a second, this is going to become more obvious. But in Remotion, there are a couple core concepts, which if you start to like grok and understand, makes your description of what you want to do much easier, because you can reference these things like consistently. So a Remotion video is essentially a composition of components. And so I'll show you the sort of like composition file in the repo. And what that allows for is you to set like how many total frames, which might be the total length of your video. So if you have a 30 frames per second, 39 seconds, you multiply that out, you get the duration in frames. You can modify all this programmatically. You can obviously modify lots of things, but know that your Remotion video is in this composition container. The next bit is this concept of a hook. So React hooks are in use in Remotion. And what they allow you to do is reuse components and access state within them so that you can achieve things like transition effects. And then the last bit is sequences. So when you create a React component that gets rendered, you arrange them in sequences. And when we look at the development environment together, you will see that there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sequences, which are essentially the different cuts of the video of the scenes. And so understanding these 3 concepts, and there's like many more, but these are the core ones that I think just unlock your ability to have at it super easily, are just useful things to keep in the back of your mind as you start to hopefully experiment on your own. So one more thing to show before we jump in is just what other tooling do you get when you use Remotion? They have this awesome studio that allows you to just see what's happening so that you don't have to render something out to a file, although you can live edit things in the code and then see it appear in this development studio, which looks like this. And I'm going to pop open in a second. So it's like localhost 3000 for your videos, and it's really nice. When you get started, if you didn't go and clone my repo, or you don't go and clone my repo, it's 2 commands. You go into a new project folder, you run npx create video, it'll bootstrap a project for you, and then you can get your dev studio running with npm run dev. So you just need to know a little React and some AI, and you don't really need to have a lot of video editing experience. The more you have and the more you've thought about creating videos, of course, the better, but it is really easy to get started. So let's jump into the demo. Okay, you can scan these. I think all of the links are up here, right, to follow along.
There's one, as you're doing that, there's one comment in the chat I wanted to get your thoughts on. One of the things is that there's often a pain point that they were really highlighting about, like, when you work with an agency to help you, I don't know, create a video or an ad, you have to define what you want, and then you might have to iterate and communicate what's in your brain and how you want to communicate your product to this agency. How does that differ from this process?
That's a great question, because actually, so I have this really detailed write-up, which I'll just expose you to for 1 second, but I think it's helpful. So you can get to it from here. It is very long, but whenever I started this, it is related to describing what you want. So the initial vision was, okay, I needed to actually come up with a concept. And so when I was thinking through this, I wrote the concept in a markdown file. And if you read through this sort of carefully, you'll see that like in general, if you had watched the video and have that in your memory, it flows like it's pretty similar, but it is actually, when you get into the details, quite a bit different in terms of what actually the end product was. This was the very beginning plan. And so I think like, no matter if you're building an app or you're trying to build a video or you're building anything, trying to precisely describe what you want to do, whether it's going to be an agent that you're orchestrating, implementing it, or you're passing it off to a human because you want a higher production value than something like this allows for with your skills or wherever you are in your journey, it's really effective. So I would say there's not really a lot more difference here. You have to concept something. And so I had been thinking about it, and just for other some background context, if you go to our website, one of the things I had originally thought of is we have these hero images like this scribe or monk. If you scroll down, we have this more modern woman that's at a computer. And I was like, I want to make them come alive. So that sort of fed into my initial plan. And I kind of want to show this transition over time of people have always written down their intent, but now they're coding with agents and they want to store that intent because it's like upstream of the source code that they write. So that was what sort of influenced me to write this initial plan. Hopefully that answers the question. I definitely think you should start with a plan. You do need to be able to think in the concepts and language of video production. Okay, what should the visuals look like? How am I going to transition between scenes? What's the purpose of this shot? And that's what a lot of this prime matter allows for. And I think you'd have to do that if you hired an agency as well. Maybe you have to do a little less of it because that's their expertise, but it's certainly a core part of the process. Make sense? And so that plan, by the way, is
Perfect.
here in the repo. So it's not just here, it's also right here. So this is that same plan. Okay. We're ready to go? Let's do it. So let me expose you to a few things. So I mentioned that once you have Remotion installed, this development environment is yours, right? You can now do things programmatically and see them change here. And what I thought would be fun is that we could do the following. I'm going to try and use the least amount of code possible, but I'm going to make a branch so that we can modify things together and it can be related to this Lightning lesson. So I actually already made one, and I'm going to check out this Lightning lesson branch, and then I'm going to start doing things and show you. So the first thing I mentioned was a Remotion video is, oops, it's this one. This hero video is a composition. So this is the composition that if I modified the duration in frames, it would extend the total length sequence here in this development environment. And then this composition is made up of sequences, which you can see are defined here in this file. And these sequences essentially correlate to these components, these scene components. And so each of these scenes, if you went and looked at the code, like for example, if I'm back here in this series sequence, this is the intent overlay component. You could just play this, or I could just modify this little timeline down here. We can edit, and then you can see the changes like live. So for example, I'll go to the intent overlay component, and let's say we want to say intent is, let's just take out intent, right? And I'll save this file. So this is unsaved change. And then if I go back here, you'll see that now it doesn't say intent is the new source code, right? That's a simple change. I don't want to modify the code myself. Let's open Claude Code. And you could do this again just with cursor, but I like Claude Code, so let's do this. And who has an idea for what to change? Give me a simple idea for what to do, and we'll just see how far we can get. I can't see the chat, so someone says.
Who's got ideas? Colors.
Okay, retro, I like this. I know who this Brian B is. Okay. Let's make
retro acid themes.
Retro acid color theme for text. Let's just do it simple to start, and then we'll do something more complex. So you'll see the code change here, and then we'll see it reload. Oh man, it's really going. Electric greens, hot pinks. We'll see. This is the downside. You have to wait a little bit. Okay, here, it's established as linear. I don't even know what's going on. Yes, let's change it. Oh, there we go. We're getting something. We're getting something somewhere. It's still going.
What was it changing when you were, that command it was changing the TSX file, intent overlay?
Yeah, it's changing. Yeah, this TSX file is the like fourth sequence in the composition. And so it's just modifying some of the styling in there. Because I gave in the prompt, specifically gave it that context and said, hey, let's make a retro acid color theme for the text.
Got it. Thanks.
So this is obviously an upgrade. It's obviously an upgrade, right? That you can now not read, but it has met Brian's specification. Sweet.
All right. Brian agrees it's an upgrade. So that's the important thing. We made the user happy. For the animated woman scene, did you pre-generate that in an external video creation tool? Is that something you're going to cover later?
Oh, yeah. So I figured that to go into all the asset creation, that would be a lot. Oh, yeah. This actually has some sound behind it that I stripped off at the end. But yes, I did. I used Midjourney to do that. And here, I'll show you real quick here. So in this part of the blog post, there's like a whole asset creation section with like the prompts and like the images, which were literally just the stock images off of our website. So I have PNG files of this. I stuck it in Midjourney, and then I prompted it by saying, I want you to animate this sequence panning behind. I didn't even type here in the candles flicker. And then you get a bunch of generations. And then I got this MP4 file and I used that as an asset that got wrapped in the scene. So these, I'm looking at the chat, Christine, these weren't stock photos. I actually generated the photos with Gamma, which I have so much Gamma.app history, but I generated these PNGs using this like cross-hatching to make like for a storybook feel first. And so I've had those assets for a while, but I didn't have these animated versions of them. And if you look in the repo in public, let me see here. In public here, you'll see that these three MP4s are the things that have the text overlays over them, right? And so you just put whatever assets you want in like your public folder, then you'd be like, hey, like go access this and animate that text over it or do a scene transition or whatever. So there is like creative thought in terms of what assets am I going to need. I'll show you like the time tunnel generation, because I know exactly where that is in my like Google Flow. I use VO3 through Flow to make just random video gen stuff. And if I log in here, you can see the prompt that I used to get that time tunnel sequence. But that was the only thing that I used like pure video gen for, where I didn't like just animate like an asset that I already had. Let's see. This is not loading. I don't know. That's disappointing. Oh, here we go. So here's some other stuff I've done, but this is the little project. And luckily so what was fun is when I was first trying to make this time tunnel transition between the scribe and the woman, I was trying to actually draw it with React, like just draw it with CSS, and it was coming out horribly. Like it just didn't look good at all. And I was like, I'm just going to generate this. So here's one of the generations. And for whatever reason, I just was like, I like this one better. It seemed a little cleaner to me. So this is the one I used. But this prompt came out of all of my failed attempts at trying to generate this sort of time sequence programmatically. So yeah, you have these things. Let's do something more complicated.
And I think one thing I see there, I won't really too much, but one thing I see there in that prompt that I don't see a lot of people do is I think a lot of people, and it's not just VO3, but like anything, is I would often see people trying to generate something and be like, give me like a turning clock that looks good. And you'll see that's a little bit more detailed. It's a little bit more clear on what he wants. And so you get a much, much better output if you learn how to create these prompts to generate good output. And it takes some time.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, I can't remember precisely where it was, but I'm pretty sure in my chat history, I asked Claude Code to just generate the prompt for me from its failed attempts at trying to generate that, what became that MP4 programmatically. So if you look through here, I don't know, maybe you can look for it. Time tunnel. I don't know where it is. I know I did this. I just don't know exactly where it was. It might be in this other one. Yeah, I can't. This won't be the best use of our time right now, but I could find it later. If we go back to cursor, let's do something else. So before this, I was like just thinking like, what could we do that would be maybe interesting to extend this video? Not that it needs to be coherent, but I was thinking like, let's make a new end sequence after, where's the context? After scene 5 that does a split screen of the animated monk in here, and let's put like the woman in this scene, and let's get some more like, and it should also compare and contrast the differences between historical intent and, I don't know, the present day. And let's see if it can figure this out. And then what we should see is a few modifications of things. So we should see eventually like a new sequence being added after this final sequence, which is this call to action with like logos and whatnot. And we should also see the video composition get elongated. And so let's look at the plan here. So it's read this scene. It's gathering context about probably what I meant in terms of what is this MP4 that I have to splice, and it's going to create a new split screen comparison scene. And then it's going to update a bunch of files, most likely, but it could fail. So we'll see. And while it's going, because it might take some number of tokens here to do all this, questions right now.
Did you write out all the words for your video and ask it to comply? If so, did it comply, or did you ask it to generate the words, I guess, in the video?
Yeah, so a lot of the video, like a lot of the initial words were defined here to some degree. And then this was my starting point, right? You'll notice like a lot of the words, like the text overlay sections are different in the final one. And so I started to edit the copy and iterate through what I wanted to say when and that sort of thing. But I did write out like this first version with AI assistance. And then I iterated over the 2 hours that it took to put this all together to get the final copy. But one of the tricks to get some of this copy is whenever I was creating this plan, oh, we have some changes. When I was creating the plan, I used the context of my website, SpecStory, which already has a lot of language on it, to inform the plan for the video. It was like about like our product. So I had already written a lot of this copy. Co-founders also helped out, right? And so I had that as starting context. That's it.
Then, Mike, you had your hand raised. Did you have something you wanted to ask?
Sure. As you were just scrolling through in the studio, sort of the ending sequences, there was some bouncing icons and then these bullets right here flying one by one. Is that something you had to, so I don't have a design background, so I know that I want it to look cool and that looks cool, but I wouldn't necessarily be able to say, oh, I want the bullets to fly in one by one and appear. Is that something you had to specify, or is this something you can get help from the LLMs on the design aspects of it as well? Like just even ideating what this should look like.
Oh, yeah. Actually, it's funny you saying, I just want the bullets to fly in one by one, like sequentially, is completely fine way to specify it.
I don't even know if I would know to say that. Once I see it, I see that's happening, but I just want some bullets that look cool. I don't know if they'd have flying in one by one is the thing I would even describe. So just even on that level of getting some design suggestions.
Yeah, you can do that with the LLM for sure. So we'll do it with this and see. I have no idea what's going to come out the other end here. So now it's adding 10 seconds to the end. So this sequence is probably going to show up. And whatever just came out of this prompt, we can iterate over to your point, Mike, and see what we can do. We can say it's probably going to look bad. Like the first attempt is going to probably not look very good. And we can ask, hey, I want you to give me some, I don't know, design inspiration to make this more coherent. What would you recommend in terms of the sequencing of whatever this text says or whatever is going on? I'm not sure what's going to happen to do that for sure. All right. It looks like it added another sequence. Let's see if this actually compiles or if it just fails. It fails. Okay, let's see. All right. So there's some bugs in this historical comparison. Even though it says it's made this split screen comparison, it's not working. So cool. Here's my hack of being lazy. I'm just going to say the following, which is the update to this has generated some compilation errors. Please help me resolve. And let's see if there's actually it might be somewhere else. I'm not really sure where it is. It seems like this is built in fine. I'll just restart the server to see what happens here. Let's see.
This is going. There's a couple of comments I'll just read out. One is that the bullets flying out, things fading in can also be done with Mana, which is a library that 3 Blue, 1 Brown made, which has similarities. Absolutely true. I think Remotion's not the only video animation library out there. If anyone wants to get it working with Mana, I'd love to see you do it and tag me and Greg and see it done with other tools. I think that's super cool. How much context did you give to Claude Code outside the plan MD file? It doesn't really tell much about Remotion and tool use.
Yeah, no. So I think I needed to give much Remotion context to that initial plan because I'd mentioned this, and I don't know whoever asked this, if you were there at the very beginning, but in this same repo, I had a previous Remotion project that I used to provide that context. So I just knew, hey, I was going to need to create a composition. I knew that composition was going to need some assets that I didn't have yet. I also knew that composition was going to be about 5 or so scenes because I didn't want this to be that much longer than 30 seconds. The initial plan was like 35 seconds, became 39 seconds. And so all the context about Remotion, it's like in the code of the example, because this was just like another Remotion project, if that makes sense. So that's how I got around that. But if you were just running that npx create -video at latest init command, you might need to give Claude Code or Cursor or whatever you're using a little bit more context about what's here. And one trick in terms of how you can do that is just be like, go read the Remotion docs, go do a web fetch of Remotion.dev, like their docs, to prime the LLM with the context that they need in terms of the fundamentals of what makes up a project, like how do you animate properties, that sort of thing. And so these docs are really good. And I would say the same strategy applies to anything you're doing where you're using like a specific framework or package or product. But let's look back at this video because I think actually our split screen actually works now. And it's actually pretty cool.
Oh, it's cool. That's awesome.
Now I wish that this, and it's also in like this acid retro thing, thanks to Brian. I don't know if this is, it's not perfect, but it's pretty cool actually, this split screen sequence. Maybe I need to update this. But yeah,
it's really nice. It's cool how it shows like the historical and the new side by side with the 2 different characters. That's awesome.
But yeah, we didn't give it a lot of, I think we probably like underspecified that scene, right? Like I didn't say like how to transition the sequence in to do the split screen. It just figured it out. Sometimes that's kind of part of the fun of doing things this way is like, you might actually get inspiration just from the initial generation yourself. Like to your point, Mike, like I didn't say, do this split screen and have the frames fade in and collapse into one another. It just did that. And I might not have known even what to say. I didn't know what to say. I just said, do a split screen. But that's why this is so fun. And it's also productive, is because if I was just trying to do this in CapCut, I would have to learn how to do these masking effects and overlays and transitions. And I wouldn't even have the ability to like prompt something, right? Like I have to learn this entire different interface. And so that's why I think this is just so delightful. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's a suggestion for a next thing to try. Keep putting questions in. We may not get to them all, but we will address them in follow-up emails or put them in the blog post if they're there, or we'll address them somehow, even if we don't get to it today. One suggestion is analyze the style of Apple, such as the fonts, colors, shading, rounded corners, etc., and apply that to scene 1.
Okay. I see this. Okay.
I'm going to address, while you're doing that, I'm going to address this other question. Remotion is surely putting together things and generating the final video. How many different tool sites are used in this video, such as Midjourney for assets? So the blog post is a great place to look. Talked about Midjourney, talked about VO3. Obviously, he's using like Claude Code and Remotion. He talked a little bit about the original asset creation with Gamma, but the blog post will have all that information there. This video will also be available publicly as well after to everyone that's in here. Yeah, look for the link for that blog post, and then that's got it so you can scan and get that information in a nice organized way.
The primary driver, though, to answer that question before the blog post, and the blog post, by the way, is here. Everything's linked again for those maybe who weren't here at the beginning from this repo. It's all in this section. So this is the tech stack. So obviously Remotion, Claude Code. I use Gamma to create some of the initial static files. I use Midjourney to animate the scribe, monk, and the woman. VO to generate that time tunnel transition. And then I did use CapCut at the very end because I wanted to have really precise control over this like audio file that I added, which is like a Paganini like violin concerto. And you can do that in Remotion, but I also wanted to add like an end sequence in CapCut. And I think if I go to my CapCut, I have this open. This was like super simple. Like I just wanted to add this, like, you see this like block effect. You could probably do that with Remotion, but it was just super easy to apply that. And then I could also render this out however I wanted in different formats, which you can also do in Remotion to output the video. But I wanted to add this MP3 and cut it, which was easier to do manually than to specify how to cut this 8-minute long thing in Remotion. So that was the stack. All right, let's see what happened to this. All right, it's getting all these Apple docs. Typography. Oh, that's fun. It found their typography guidelines.
Do you have a technical background? What do you think the threshold is for someone to be able to build the way that you're building?
I do have a technical background, but I have been pretty hands-off keyboard until the last year. Before I co-founded SpecStory, I was a chief product officer at Pluralsight, which is like a Udemy or Coursera. And I was not doing any development myself, but like previous I did. I think the thing that you have to lean into is just being like super curious and persistent about figuring out these things and how to leverage LLMs and agents to your advantage. It's when you approach it like, hey, I don't know a lot of these things, but I need to ask lots of questions, like to Mike's question about, hey, I don't even know if I would know to ask this question. He just asked these questions to the LLMs over and over again. Whether you're creating a video or building a website or building a product or building an extension or whatever, I think the age that we live in and these tools that are, in the grand scheme of things, not that expensive relative to what was not even possible before, enable your curiosity and like adaptability to really shine. When it comes to this code, like I understand, it, but I certainly don't understand most of it. I can read through and figure out, oh, this is where I need to modify this particular file using Remotion as a package, but I'm not writing the majority of this code. What I'm doing is I am specifying what I want, understanding kind of the outcome I want to achieve, and then bouncing back and forth to the thing that I can verify, which is this running video, to see if it's achieving like what I want. And here's some Apple styling. This didn't come out super well, but I think you can see it in the RN tent. It does look a little Apple-y compared to what it said before, but yeah.
Awesome. Let's see. I guess there's a couple more questions to wrap things up here. I think, what are the basics of this library that you should know to use this effectively? I think you talked a little bit about it at the start, but what would you say to people who want to clone this repo and start editing it or extending it? What do they need to learn?
I think that the main concept is like, what is a Remotion video in this context? So it's a composition of scenes that are sequenced, that animate and have properties associated with them, and they are components themselves. So once you build a mental model around that, like understanding that, oh, I want to add a scene between this scene, and it's going to be in this sequence, to be able to verbalize that to the LLM that you might be using to help you actually generate this stuff is very helpful. Beyond that, I think if you just read the fundamentals here, gives you a pretty good breakdown, and there's a lot to read, but you don't need to know all of it. I would say, just to normalize everyone, like I read maybe this set of docs for 5 minutes, and I just started trying things out and seeing what I could achieve, because I'd much prefer to learn like hands-on than to be reading a bunch of docs. And that's why LLMs and AI powered development is so fun, because you have a very short REPL cycle of, I have some idea, I want to try it out, I know the context that I'm going to need to provide to get started.
So I'm just going to ask again to try and get at your expertise on this. So if you didn't have this AI to be able to like help you with the Remotion code, and you really wanted to make a product video, like how far do you think you could get in an hour without an AI assistant at this point, knowing what you know after building this project versus having the AI assistant? Like if you had to code it yourself.
Oh, I would not be able to get very far myself. Is the answer. Yeah, in this case, I am definitely relying on a lot of assistants to do this. And I have a million other things to do. And I was just intrigued by this idea, and I was like, I want to make something. And so I had at it. But yeah, there's a learning curve to anything, right? Some of the first questions about like, how do you even think about what you need to specify that you want to do, right? Getting good at that by just prompting for any use case is really helpful. It's important to know too, like I've made a lot of like video gen before this. The reason I picked Remotion, which I probably didn't hit on the beginning, is I wanted to get really high fidelity text. And there's a scene here that I just knew I wasn't going to be able to achieve if I just made a bunch of V3 videos, like this scene where there's this built editor. I'll make this bigger so people can actually see it. So this is a React component, right? It's not actually an asset that exists anywhere outside of the code. To be able to build this, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to I wasn't going to be able to do VO gen for this because of like the text on the screen, because I tried to make so many other like high fidelity versions of a terminal with text, and it's just impossible right now with the current gen of the models. So that's one of the reasons I picked Remotion, is because I knew I could just programmatically build this actual scene and it wouldn't rely on some other asset.
Awesome. So I guess the things that I'm taking away here is that you built super amazing video here using AI coding practices to build a video that you can use commercially, that you wouldn't really be able to do yourself without this AI coding stuff. And you did this because you know how to prompt the models, you know how to ask questions. What are the important things you need to learn about a tool versus not? You don't necessarily need to dive into all the syntax. You have this intuition about what kinds of concepts are going to help you make progress. Is that kind of the takeaway that you think should get from it?
That's the wrap. And that's why I think, I don't know where most of you might be in your journey, but that's why I wanted to make it as accessible as possible in terms of, look, like however you want to jump in, if you're comfortable already with code, or you need more of the backstory, or you want to see my exact conversations that I use to get a sense of how you might prompt, because again, those exact conversations that went into all of this are right here.
Create these conversations. I know the answer, but I think everyone else should know the answer too.
Well, that's the shameless plug. Yeah, SpecStory. So what we help folks do right now is we have a bunch of extensions, one for GitHub Copilot, one for Cursor, one for Claude Code, that allow you to extract your chat history from interacting with agents. For example, this chat history, if you're a Claude Code user, we have something called SpecStory, which is a CLI app. And I can run this and see, oh, what does this allow me to do? I can just sync all my chats. So I can sync the chat that I just had if I'm not running this sort of interactively to launch Claude Code. I'll run this sync, and then you'll see 5 new sessions from this repo are here. This is the chat that I just had. So that chat that you see in the repo, I extracted with the SpecStory CLI for Claude Code. And you can see that this was the first prompt I did in this session. And it has all of the history from what we did together during this Lightning lesson, which I'll push as a branch to that same repo so you can see this too. I know it's a lot to take in, so hope people are following along.
Yeah, I think the key is that everyone, I think, should try and clone this repo, make some sort of change to the video or extend it. If you can upload it to like YouTube or something and share it with us, that'd be super cool. I'd love to see that. Whether it's like, I don't know, something that makes the video better or just something funny, either would be super cool. And yeah, if you get stuck, I'm teaching another shameless plug, but I'm teaching an AI coding course coming up that starts in October. And if you feel like you're having trouble making progress with the AI coding side, you're not getting as good results, I think that's a great course to check out. I've got a Substack where I'm covering different tools and techniques and stuff. SpecStory's got a blog. I'm going to repost all the links there, and you'll also get all of those in the email. Be sure to follow us on social media. We both put out a ton of like free content. We also have commercial content like courses and other things, but you should definitely follow because you're going to get a lot of free stuff from SpecStory and other people. So
yeah, that's great. And if anyone wants to, whether it's like, depending on where you're on your journey, SpecStory, we have a Slack community you can join. Like if you want to use our extensions, you have questions about them. We have this new take on an editor, but feel free to join this. This is a link. This is in this precise slideshow, and we'd be more than happy to help. This is just such a fun time. I enjoy seeing what everyone's doing, no matter if it's building a video, your app, your startup, working on something for your company. It's just a lot of fun.
yeah, and I think things are changing super quick. I think it's important to find the people who are adopting the new paradigms, adopting them quickly, following them, seeing what they do, trying to build off of what they do, like this video. That's the way that you can stay ahead, is by finding the people who are doing these kinds of things. And most of them are putting out lots of free content, lots of free repos like this. Yeah, definitely stay connected.